Okay, I don't know if anyone can hear me. Let's see. Okay, you can hear me? Okay, great. I think my video's froze, but who knows? We'll just keep going. Is the video frozen, guys? I have no idea. On my end, it looks frozen. So I have a USB port. Okay, I think my camera died actually. So it's plugged into USB and it no longer works. I will continue on though and we'll load an image real quick. Maybe. Can you guys hear me or no? I have no idea if this is still going. I can use my phone. I'm not sure if I can use my phone on this, but we'll give it a shot. Okay, you guys can hear me. Okay, so I'm just going to do this without the video then, since my camera doesn't work, my USB camera, for some reason. I would do on the phone, but I don't know how to set it up to record for later as well, as I'm running through OSB software. Be awesome to put a better image up. But anyways, we'll just go with the sound. We'll just go with good sound here. So anyways, it's great to have you guys here. I'm sorry it's kind of a weird start and a delay here. I've never done a live stream. We shot last week a test run, and we had internet issues, so we ended up getting a new modem, getting all that kind of squared away. So that was kind of cool. But I'm going to start off with here, as I kind of showed in the video, I have 2 sheets of paper that are actually July 2020 questions. I'm just going to kick off with a few of them, and then I know I see comments in the chat, and I'm just going to start going through those as well. So we'll just kind of have a fun time chatting here. Anyways, maybe I'll try to get the camera going later if we have other, I don't know, have a break or something. But one of the questions I'm going to start off with here came from someone a few weeks ago. I guess this last week, and it's kind of a 2-part question here. Question 1 is, you said you don't approve masters that have 1-year duration. What if the master's program just has an apprenticeship for the 2nd year? I mean, they teach us in the 1st year, and the 2nd year is a placement in the industry. Almost all masters in the UK are like this. So that's the first part. See if the second part builds on this. So I'll answer the first part here. So, of course, one of my key takeaways, one of the big things for education in quant finance specifically is, like, we make money off our brains. So it's going to be challenging without enough knowledge to really build. I can tell you I took a 1.5 years of technical school. As many of you know, I took off a semester in the middle and transferred programs. In that semester, I spent an entire semester studying just as much as when I was in my master's. So really 2 full years. 2 years is not even close to enough. Like, you could spend a lifetime learning and studying. And so the real question I think that people have and educational programs have is, what is the minimum that we can give people? Because programs don't want to charge you a ton, right? So obviously 1.5 years of tuition is significantly cheaper than 2 years. A year is even cheaper than 2 years. Again, if you're in the UK, that's the standard there. Like, people that are going to be hiring you in the UK, that's what everyone else is going to have. So it's not really an issue of having less or more. Again, I would look at things, though, that you want, like educationally, you should try to do something above and beyond. And I'll touch on this in a few other questions that I had on this sheet if I cover them. But you want to do as much learning as possible after your master's or PhD. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways here with a lot of people don't fully understand. It's super frustrating, and people ask, like, Dimitri, what is the bare minimum? Like, if you're asking the bare minimum, you're not going to make it in quant finance. Because the guys that are on top, the guys that are making a lot of money, that are running programs, that are fairly successful, those guys are the ones that are eat, sleep, and breathe quant finance. Like, I've got textbooks, which I'd show you if my video is working, but I have stacks of textbooks just sitting around for multiple reasons. 1, for videos, of course, for you guys, but 2, for work. Like, I'm working on something, and you remember something that you needed to check in the model, and you're like, that doesn't quite look right. There was an assumption about this. Test X, Y, and Z was used. That seems like the wrong test, right? And so you can Google stuff, but it's a lot easier and more reliable to look at textbooks because the internet's full of lies. Yes, the internet in quant finance has a lot of misleading material, even on the educational side, even in academic papers that are not necessarily academic through, like, published reputable journals. They're like online forums through, like, I don't know, R forums, SAS forums, Python forums, stats forums, all that type of stuff. So anyways, so if you have a 1 year in UK and you're going to work in the UK, there's really no problem with it, but just realize you're going to really need more education and learning regardless if you do 1 year or 2 years afterwards. The second question here, so let's see. The second question here is going to be, if my bachelor's was in engineering and I have 1 year to my apply deadline for university, what are things I can do to strengthen my resume in finance? I'm taking a Coursera course that they give a certificate afterwards. Are they worth anything? This is a touchy topic for me. So how do you strengthen your resume? One is just reading books on the side. This isn't going to be a resume piece, but I'll show you how it kind of works. One trick I tell people, and it's not necessarily a lie, but you want to be honest about it. But when you write the resume, a lot of times, like I mentioned, a year and a half is nothing for a master's, even a year, for example, or 2 years, or a PhD. Let's say you did, I don't know, 7 years for a PhD in the US somewhere. Even if you do all that material, right, you're still going to do side learning and side research projects, and you're still doing other stuff, and you need to incorporate that into the resume. But when you list Udemy courses or you list Coursera courses or something like that, from my perspective, it's like, I don't know. I know they don't cover things in good depth. I'd much rather see like a textbook listed, but even then it seems kind of odd. So the way to do it is when you write the resume, right, put on your graduate degree. So I don't know, Dimitri Bianco, University of Michigan, got master's in applied economics. And then when you list topics out that you've covered in the program, if you studied those topics outside of your academic training, I list them actually in that because I studied them during that time period. But the kicker here is that you have to be able to answer questions. So you can't like just list stuff out, which a lot of students do this. They list stuff out and then I interview you and then I ask based on the resume, and a lot of those topics don't actually match. So it's like if I can ask like, oh, I don't know, you listed I don't know, let's say a time series, because everyone knows it's my favorite. If you list time series and I ask you some basic starter questions in time series, and then all of a sudden I start asking different questions, it's because I've realized you don't know what you're talking about, and so we're just going to change topics. But if you list it and you've studied it and you've read about it, I ask fairly easy questions to start with, like just trying to get a fun conversation going. So that's one way to strengthen the resume is do self-learning. You could do a Coursera course if you wanted. It's nice having something guided. I prefer textbooks because you end up with a lot more rigor and a lot more detail in a textbook than you're going to end up with in like a Coursera course. Like I'll kind of let you guys know now. I'm working on a Udemy course. It's supposed to be like a super basic intro to quant finance, more or less targeted at someone from like a finance or business background. So I don't know, something different. It's not going to be as quanty because I find when I teach quant material, people are like, oh, wow, that was really interesting and amazing. But then the material's too above you and you miss kind of pieces of it because you have holes in your education. And so based on that, I'm doing a low-level one. But it's really hard to build these courses and provide enough material in a course comparable to like an academic institution. So for me, that's kind of a huge challenge just in general. So that's kind of how you beef up your resume here. And Coursera courses, if you're learning something out of it, go for it. Is it going to look amazing on a resume and people are going to pat you on the back and say, wow, a Coursera course? No, of course not. The degree is kind of the moneymaker for quants in general. So let me hit up a question that was here at the live stream here from Riley, because it was way at the top. Like I think he was like the second person here. But what technical skills and soft skills do you look for in a quant research analyst intern? So out of full disclosure, I don't work on the research side. But when you are going to be looking for quants in general, so I define quant very differently than most, but there's not a lot of difference between those for, I guess, most quants. Quant's job is essentially to build models and theories and strategies. And then, as a lot of you have known, I've mentioned, there's different jobs outside of quant that people think are quant, which I personally don't find are quant. So in traders, no, I don't think you're a quant. Why? Because anyone can do it with a business degree. I have a video coming out in a few weeks on why I didn't go into trading. So it's a whole breakdown of that. Quants and traders have different skill sets that are required to do actual quant work. Again, implementation is what you would hire someone with a really strong computer science background, like a master's or PhD in computer science. If you have a quant, most typically with like a financial engineering degree or something, and they say, oh, they're going to do implementation, they go on and on about it, you typically don't have the background to do it. Typically, the students that will go into that with financial engineering degrees already have an undergrad in computer science. And again, a lot of people in the US that are doing implementation at like hedge funds and things are going to have masters and PhDs. At banks, you typically see undergrads and masters. So you would need those technical skills if you want to work in implementation. But technical skills for quants, it's all model development. So if you're working in a specific asset class for the position, we would ask you questions around those assets. So that's just kind of like the basic introduction. Something they do a lot of times if you're going to work, I don't know, say stocks and equities, because it's so easy to pick on here. They might ask you to do like a stock pitch. Like throw me a stock pitch, right? Most quants, a lot of quants don't prepare for this, and they don't realize like you need to think these things through. If you're working or interviewing for an equity position, like you need to have something in your head, like I'm going to buy Tesla because it's through the roof or whatever. That's not a good answer. You need to have like a full out like this is why I would invest in this company or this is why I would short this position. Kind of have that discussion and talk about that a little bit. In technical skill wise, time series, time series, time series, time series. I can't beat this enough. I don't, so my job technically isn't time series focused on the credit side, but I can tell you being the only like time series expert in the position allows me to take almost every time series project. Time series is used in everything from derivative pricing. So if you think about stochastic calculus, right, you take these courses, you learn how to price Black-Scholes. Again, volatility we know is an assumption, is a poor assumption. So you end up having to model volatility, and doing that again, you're going to use the simplest form possible would be Arch and Garch, which is time series models. Again, Markov models across time, this derivation of time series, stochastic processes, doing all the calculus on stochastic processes, so stochastic calculus. Those are all time series. So time series is one of the biggest key crucial skills here. Also in technical skills, make sure you know the basics, because far too often do I see rookies who don't know the basics. Like they're so excited to tell you about their ARIMA model or their REMAX model, or I don't know, their hidden Markov model or something. And yet when we go back to like fundamental metrics, like analyzing errors and residuals, they seem like lost and confused on like why you're testing this. And yet these are like the key foundations. So technical skill wise, I would just know all of the basics, right? It's part of the job depending on what you're doing. If you're going to be working in a credit, operations, different areas of market risk, or PPNR risk, regulatory risk, make sure that you know just basic stats. So OLS regression, time series, which is again linear regression and forms. Data science is one of those new hot topics that everybody's talking about. So if you want to have some of that in your like back pocket, just make sure you're prepared. The easiest way to prepare for this on a technical one is look at jobs postings online. And if that job looks like a job you want, make sure you have the skills they listed. Because that's how HR is going to filter you, and that's how people are going to interview you. Soft skills, that's a tough one. I hate when people list soft skills on resumes like, I'm a hard worker, or I'm a people person or whatever. I'm honest or whatever, fair in my dealings. I don't know. You can't list these things. It just seems like fake and phony. So I don't know. I don't encourage people to list soft skills. But things that we're going to look for when I interview is like, are you nice and friendly? How did you treat people? So yes, you hear stories about like, I don't know, somebody walked in for an interview and they treated the receptionist terribly. And then, I don't know, they didn't get an interview or something like that. So yeah, we look at stuff like that as well. I also, hold on. Apparently, since I'm not receiving enough video, you might receive some buffering. I don't know. Hopefully the audio is still fine. But soft skill wise, like we're going to see how you behave in interviews. I will give you stressful questions sometimes towards the end. So I don't want to throw you off your game at the beginning. But we kind of try to just judge like how you perform, who you are. Again, I try to ask non-relevant questions just to be nice. Because, right, soft skills are hard to judge. Looking at resumes too, we ask how you work on teams. I'll ask like ridiculous questions of like, I don't know, what was a conflict you had with a colleague in the past and how did you resolve it? Again, this could be the same thing for a student, but that's kind of what we're looking for in the soft skills side. Communication's key. All the communication we're going to pick up. So when we ask you technical questions, you're presenting to us. And if you're presenting well, like obviously you're explaining it to me well, then you can clearly have, I don't know, good communication skills on the technical side. So all that, I guess that answers that question. Let's answer a few there that are coming in. Somebody asked, what about panel data? I'm guessing that's in regards to the time series. That depends on what you are doing, what you're not doing. So yes, I've worked in credit risk throughout my career and a variety of other types of risk, as many of you know. Panel data is huge in credit risk if you're doing time series modeling with credit risk. So for those of you that don't know, panel data, imagine you have mortgages and you have, I don't know, say I don't know, 100,000 applications a month or something, and you have all this data going through time. You have these pools of data, which is the panels that actually go through time. So yes, panel data, panel models are important. Let's see. Let's see if we can grab a question. I know there's some at the top here. I'll grab these real quick. Let's see. Scroll through all my nonsense of my technical issues. Okay. So I'll answer this one for George here. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm currently studying industrial engineering with a concentration in deep learning. What advice could you give me if I want to become a quant? Deep learning is interesting because it's one of my personal interests. So I'm looking at currently different applications inside of finance. But my advice to you would be try to diversify just a little bit, because deep learning is going to focus very solely on deep learning, which is a very niche topic right now. There's not a lot of applications for it unless you're doing research. So again, in the US, I don't know, depends on other countries. In the US, to do research for quant side, you typically have to have a PhD. If you don't have a PhD, it's kind of a bummer. But by diversifying, I mean like strengthen your statistical skills, because the one thing that people aren't going to tell you, which is really odd, I was in a podcast recently, somebody mentioned, the skills needed to be a quant are math, computer science, and finance. And I kind of looked at them kind of dumbfoundedly, thinking like, well, statistics is kind of the core of the entire crux of quant finance. I would just diversify out your skills and have some statistics on there. So try to learn about other types of regressions, more traditional techniques. You'll find out that most machine learning and data science is just stats relabeled. And then things like deep learning and, I don't know, even gradient boosting somewhat copied from stats in many ways. But you'll see that a lot of it overlaps. So having that deeper background is important. And then let's see, hold on. And then also just learn finance. If you don't know finance, try to get enough finance down pat, because having some financial, some finance theory, understanding what you're actually going to be applying these things to is important. And you'll find out in the industry as well, defining your problem correctly is like 90% of the battle. And that last 10% is all that technical complication. But if you misdefine the model up front, then you're just wasting months of time building something that's not going to work in the end, even though you think it will. So just kind of some tips there. All right, let's see what else we have. Okay, so somebody said, Dimitri, you mentioned doing a video on good graduate programs in the future. Could this video include European universities, specifically UK ones, and their graduate programs? Let me make a note, because I'm sitting here with a pen and pencil. So UK and Europe university to the rankings. Okay, so I'll talk about this a little bit, because it's kind of been an idea of mine, a secret project I've kind of been working on somewhat. I don't like the rankings that currently stand. I know I'm going to take a lot of criticism for it, but a lot of the ways that the rankings now work is based on how much money you make coming out, and what is your job placement rate, and what's your tuition, and how many applications do you have. These are all just nonsensical metrics. And the reason for this is, A, you can lie on them. And to be honest with you, multiple universities have been caught lying. So I know that for a fact. And then outside of that, a lot of these are just nonsensical because they're not defined very well here. So what is job placement? So say your job placement rate's 100%. Well, A, I know you're lying because some programs, your students are actually emailing me. So if you're a program and you're listening, take note of this. Your program contacts me and says, they want rankings or whatever. You look at their rankings online, and the students are actually looking for, they're looking for work. So you don't have 100% placement rate. The other issue is I find programs that have great placement rate, your students are placed in what I would consider non-quant roles. So you're either placing students in a lot of business roles. So investing, sales, trading, things that you don't even need the quant degree for. If you don't need the degree, why would you waste all the time and money getting it? And then why are students paying, $70,000, $100,000, $200,000 for a master's degree, or maybe less if you're in another country? But why are you paying all this money if you're not even placing students in the job that you're supposed to train them for? But I want to do, it's going to be like an honorable mention, and it's going to be by invitation only. So I'm going to prevent a lot of the nonsense and not having to deal with grumpy program directors. And yes, they do not like me, many of the program directors, as I've talked to them. But it's going to be by invitation. I'm going to go through and I'm going to look at programs that I think are top notch, just from like a online review, and then I'm going to reach out to these programs and see if we can get more information on them and do a more comprehensive review of it. And I might provide what I'm looking at to provide it. I might not. But yes, I will consider doing UK and Europe. I don't know. Maybe I will consider branching out to China, for example, as well, or maybe India if they have any programs. But yeah, so I will consider that. I know it's kind of a pain and kind of one-sided. It seems like we have these rankings and they're all U.S. universities and like one from Canada or two from Canada. And then sometimes you see like, I don't know, Zurich or something listed, which it's a decent program or good program from what I've heard. But again, it's not looking at UK or any other country, so I will consider that. Let's see, next question here. Okay, this is a good question here. As a quant, we need to be a continuous learner. Based on this philosophy, does the employer provide professional or technical training, or are we expected to do that on our own? So companies in general don't care, which is really sad. I guess it's too bad I'm laughing about it, but no, companies don't typically help you. They don't really care. And I'll make this clear up front because I don't talk about this a lot, but you can go and you can get a master's and you can get lucky, or you can find a good program that will just feed you into a job, and you can literally just sit back and do the bare minimum. And I don't know, you might get fired. They might just keep you around for a while because it's too hard to get rid of people. But yeah, the majority of quants, or people claiming to be quants in general, they're just coasting by and they're not self-learning. So you can do it without self-learning and you can just kind of hang out. That being said, that's a miserable life to live, at least I think. I've got promoted and kind of worked my way up the ladder fairly quickly at a fairly young age. And I think the majority of my success on this has to do with the number of self-learning projects and self-learning I've done, number of books I've read, for example, on the side, because my first job really was in implementation. So I haven't talked a lot about that, but kind of implementation. And then I was like challenging development and saying, hey, you guys aren't doing your job right. And then they said, no, this is how you do it. And so I started like cracking open textbooks in my free time at work and also at home. And I'm spending hours and hours and hours reading. And like, I can see this real world problem and I'm able to kind of help solve it. And I wasn't necessarily taking that seriously, but I eventually ended up, they said, hey, we have models that need to get developed. We don't have staff, please develop them. So having that self-training, having that challenge, having that interaction with them allowed them to say, hey, he's competent enough to do this. And then that allowed me to do model development on PP&R models. I also did self-learning on operational risk, again, years before I used it. And then I got thrown into a position where I was actually running a project in a team somewhat on doing work for a model that was an operational risk. So every great opportunity I've had has come up because I've been prepared for it. So you need to prepare for that on your own. Again, I'll emphasize textbooks are kind of like the moneymaker of what I would say that you would need. Like textbooks are where it's at. Companies, though, do occasionally, if you ask, they will help with designations, which I think aren't necessarily that great, but I don't know. You can study if you want and do designations. I convinced one of my companies to pay for the FRM, so Financial Risk Management designation. They paid for just the exams. I paid for the textbooks, and they paid for the exams. And it's after I passed them, they paid for them. But again, most companies aren't going to pay for it. It's really too bad. I've been like yelling and screaming on the top of my lungs at the industry and in conferences with all these other executives and stuff around, trying to explain to people like we have an education problem. A master's isn't enough, and a PhD is not enough. It's great to get started, but you need to do self-learning. So anyways, I won't go on that too much more, but you need to do it on your own. It is too bad companies don't do it. I'm sure some companies do. If they did, I'd be super excited. So anyways, somebody else put, can you upload to GitHub projects you do? It's possible, but I probably won't do it just because of the time constraints and the amount of effort it would take me to do GitHub. All right, let's hear this about some more recent questions. Let's see. Looks like people are chatting with each other. Oh, somebody put, what does brown bag mean? I'll answer this. I don't see it answered or not. Brown bag sessions are just work lunch sessions. So I present a lot at brown bags at work, which just means I pick some topic or somebody has a topic and they schedule a meeting at lunchtime. Everybody brings their lunch, i.e. their brown bag. And then they use that time just to kind of learn and do self-learning. Let's see what Tom says here, because Tom's been messaging quite a bit. Is computer science to quant a doable or common path? Kind of. If you have, there are quite a few students that will actually have a computer science undergrad and they go into a master's in financial engineering, computational finance, and they'll do that. That's a common route because computer science requires math, programming, and some stats somewhat, depending if you use some algorithms or whatnot, or data science. So yeah, there are some ways to do it. Is it possible to go from a computer science degree straight to quant with nothing else? It's possible, but it's not super likely. It depends on the company. So anyways, yeah, he says here, let's see. He's in computer science. Yeah, it's in a math program. Yeah, I mean, if you take enough math classes and you write the resume correctly, you can do it. There's nothing to prevent you from doing it. So yeah, that's kind of good. Yeah, you can do it with a computer science degree. Again, I want to see a lot of stats for quants. And again, if you haven't taken much stats and that's what we're requiring, you're not going to get hired. But if you can take some electives on the stat side and kind of beef it up, it's possible. So you can do that. So somebody said, can you speak on standards for top quant masters, admissions, GPA, GRE, etc.? I can speak. You can look on QuantNet to get averages of what people are going to be actually, what programs have. But remember, an average is an average. There's people below that and there's people above that. I would say to you, the best way to approach this is do the best you can do on like the GRE. And look at programs and select a few that are like your ideal programs. Like for me, I would have loved to go into Columbia. That was my ideal program. I think Columbia and Princeton. But also apply to backups because you might need the backups. The GRE scores on average on mine back in the day. So GREs used to be out of 800. I think they're out of like 150 something now, 160. Back in the day, I think our average score, even with my low score, was like, they said it was 800 out of 800. I think realistically it's probably like a 790 out of 800, and they're 10-point increments. So near perfect GREs. You don't need to have a perfect one. Again, just do the best you can. Look around online because different programs are going to have very different average GREs. GPA, to be honest with you, I don't really care about GPA too much. I know a lot of programs look at it though. Again, if it depends on what your programs are. And I'll talk about this a little bit too for selecting programs. Just because a program is high ranked does not mean a program is good. A program can be ranked number 1, number 2, and be complete garbage for what you're trying to do. So if you want to do, I don't know, risk management, quant like I am, if you want to do, I don't know, derivatives, so you're going to be like someone that actually does financial engineering, the actual engineering of financial derivative products, you need to look at different programs because different programs specialize in that. A lot of times the very rigorous, well-structured programs that are going to give you the best education possible are programs that are at good universities. You have good math programs, for example, or stats programs. But they're not going to be as well ranked because a lot of times they're not in the best city location. A lot of times if you focus on education and rigor instead of focusing on networking and job placement, which is what a lot of programs do, you will have poor job placements. Your rankings will be low. And so I think there's a lot of really good value programs where you could have lower GRE and GPA scores and still get a solid education. And then the networking piece is really going to be on you. So it's nice to be, from one of these big name schools or, be close to New York or Chicago or, I don't know, some city that's going to have good job placement. So it's good to be close to those. There's something else to consider. But you can do around that. If you have a good education, I think that's the hardest component. The networking piece will come with practice. Let's see what else is on here. Somebody else is talking on here. I think UMich's undergrad real analysis sequence is about the same difficulty as Harvard's 55, so pretty tough. I'll talk a little bit about Michigan just because someone's bringing it up here. So I absolutely loved going to Michigan. One of the things that I think that's one of the biggest draws for their programs in general is that University of Michigan, when I went there, there's over, I think, 100 programs, graduate programs, so master's or PhD, that were in the top 25. So you think about that. Think about there's like math departments, stats departments, biostats. I don't know. There could be arts in there too. Arts, literature, all that stuff. They just had really good programs all the way around. And the original financial engineering program at UMich, which is no longer there, employers are saying that the stochastic calculus portions of that course were far better than other universities, and so those students were actually being placed in more financial engineering roles. Again, this is what I heard through alumni. That program no longer exists. Again, we took multiple stochastic calculus courses, not just one or maybe two, like I see a lot of programs do today. But yeah, look for good structured programs, guys. Try to find good education, and a lot of times you can find it at a decent value because some universities just have cheaper tuition. And I'll mention this as well because, I don't know why, this is one of the questions I had on my list that somebody asked, but it had to do with, Dimitri, I want to go to a graduate program in the United States, but I'd go to, I don't know, some no-name university or a university you're not going to know of in another country. Okay, the vast majority of quants in the US that are working are not born American citizens. So a lot of quants actually come from China and India. Those are like the biggest populations possible. Like I can promise you, you will always work with probably someone from China and India. And the reason for that is, again, the quant market in the United States is huge. This is like, I think I read somewhere it's like 70% of all quantitative finance jobs are in the United States. The United States, again, likes to hire from U.S. universities. And so a lot of these students from China and India, and again, we had students from South America and Europe and other places as well, Africa, for example, the Middle East and other places. Any other place I missed, I'm sure I've seen people from your country of some sorts. They apply to the U.S. because the majority of these top-rated, super technical programs are looking for, people that are super STEM designated. A lot of Americans, A, don't want to do STEM, and B, the ones that do, they're all like super excited to be engineers or like, I don't know, careers that we all understand. And as soon as you say quant finance, like that just blows people out of the water and they don't understand. They go, I don't want to go into business. That sounds dumb. I want to do like, science. So again, a lot of them are going to come from international. You can come from universities that are smaller. Again, if you have a decent GRE and a decent GPA, you should do fine. And a good TOEFL. So TOEFL is required if you're coming from international. Let's see what other questions are coming in here at the bottom. Someone wants me to talk about Purdue's undergrad in computer science. I don't know much about Purdue's undergrad in computer science. Let's see. If I only want to do, where'd that question go? Okay, if I want to only do a lot of math and statistics and not much programming, can I be a quant and finance firm? No. Short answer that, absolutely not. Again, you can't explore math and stats without programming, at least in practice. So think about you see data and, I don't know, you analyze, let's just say we look at a stock price here. Right off the bat, looks like a serial correlation. Okay, we're going to have to use some sort of model as serial correlation. How do you test for that? Well, we're going to have to use programming. So you can use R and Python. Again, you're not going to be a programmer, like a real programmer, as I would say, like a computer scientist, like coding, like, I don't know, 40 hours to 60 hours a week constantly. But again, to explore ideas, make charts, look at your data, run tests, that sort of thing, you're going to need to be able to program. We had a PhD student that was super, super smart, and she hated programming, was terrible at it, and she didn't last very long because if you can't code, then you can't express your ideas very well, and yeah, it's just a base requirement. But again, it's not going to be like the same as like an intense computer scientist if you had like a computer science degree. Let's see, any advice for a non-target finance major, previously electrical engineering, from the US that really wants to go into good financial engineering program? Okay, so I'll share this. This is a little bit of a tip here. if you come from a finance background, again, you are going to need backup schools, backup schools, backup schools. The more backup schools you have, the better. So I will tell you, I applied my first year and I got rejected from every program because all the programs I applied to were like, I don't know, NYU, Columbia, Princeton, I don't know, all the top name programs. I would apply again for a few that are like your dream schools, ones that you just absolutely love to go to, and then I'd apply to some more reasonable backup programs. There's nothing wrong with going to what I typically label as a fake financial engineering degree. So I have a whole video on that. They're typically ran out of the business schools. They're not very rigorous compared to, I don't know, other top programs. But that being said, if you can do some self-learning and you can improve your math and stat skills, and that program can give you like a layout and a fundamental kind of process to follow, and you can pick up textbooks and learn on the side, you can go to one of these so-called fake programs, as I call them. They're financial engineering programs, but they don't cover the same depth and rigor as what I would deem a more appropriate school. You can go to one and you can get essentially the networking from the program, which is crucial. You can get the degree listed on your resume, which is crucial. You will learn when you're there, but again, you are going to need to like dig deep and do it at night. Like I remember when I took off a full semester, and even during my programs, I remember studying till like 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night and just feeling absolutely terrible. It was miserable at points. That's just grad school as a whole. But yeah, you can do it, and you can go to not so good programs sometimes. But again, try to apply to a variety of programs. That will allow you to go from like a business degree into quant finance. But I can tell you it's going to be pure hell. If you actually purchase that Intro to Stochastic Calculus book I mentioned, a lot of math majors say that the books are super challenging. Stochastic calculus as a whole is just kind of those areas that's hard to grasp because it's not pure math and it's not pure probability. Trying to put the two halves together is just kind of a pain. So anyways, let's see what else is on here. Okay, I'll answer this one. This is kind of an odd one. I have only heard about 4 types of quants: researcher, developer, trader, and portfolio manager. What is quant analyst? Okay, those 4 I would not consider quants. I view this as kind of, I don't know, I come at this from a banking perspective, and I don't know, people get all excited and talk about trading and finance and investing, but I'll come at it from a banking perspective here. I view quant finance as really everybody is going to do either model development or model validation. Model development builds models and strategies. Model validation looks at those ideas and strategies and tries to figure out if they're valid or not. So like, did you do it correctly or did you screw something up? That's going to be what we're looking at. Now you can break that down into different categories here. So quant research or researchers typically have PhDs because they have a research background. Again, you're building strategies, you're behind the scenes, you're looking at theories. Again, you're building models though and tools. That's what quants do. You could be someone who works like at a bank, for example, like a model developer at a bank in risk management. Now, risk management is kind of a tricky term. It just means you build models that the bank uses to make money, typically, and for regulations. And anyways, so at a bank, for example, you have to price loans, derivative products, predict capital for the bank, stuff like that. Again, you're all doing the same thing. You're using models, whether they're math, stats, data science, machine learning, all that. You're building models to do that. Now, again, the validation side is going to be doing the same thing, but looking at those from a conceptual standpoint of if it makes sense or if they work or whatever. So that's what I do it. If you look at like portfolio manager, these are just like higher up positions of like, you start off as an analyst. So analyst as a super general term is someone that just does analytical work. So I don't know. It can be used in almost any industry. I don't think it has a lot of merit in the quant world. If you see quant analyst, that just means it's an entry-level quant position. But again, you'd work your way up from like doing analytical work, understanding your positions, creating the strategies, and then like a portfolio manager is really like a manager job. So you could probably do it with a business degree or something. But the portfolio manager, they would just be responsible for like managing the portfolio. When people go, oh, they get paid a lot. It's like, well, yeah, it's a manager job. That's what they do. Traders, again, I don't consider traders quants. The skill sets are very, very different. Again, MFE students go into trading. That's fine. You can be a trader. Having an understanding of the tools and the metrics and things that are being used and created by the quants that are doing research and model development. they're going to give you the tools to actually figure out how to, I don't know, how to actually do what you're like going to be doing. So you'll understand what you're using better. So yeah, those are kind of the differences in what an analyst is. Okay, somebody asked, what are your thoughts on causality models? I think finance is getting more into machine learning, casual, sorry, my bad. Models, is that true? Okay, so machine learning is being used, and the vast majority of people claiming to be machine learning experts are doing it haphazardly. And I don't know, I compare it to taking like a bunch of 5-year-olds and giving everyone a knife and putting them in a room and then thinking everything's going to go well. Of course, the results are going to be treacherous and terrible. That's what machine learning people are doing right now in general. Yes, quant finance across the board, any industry, any area inside of quant finance is using machine learning and exploring it. I've seen it actually being used. That being said, it's also been used by some firms for over a decade now in finance. So this isn't necessarily like groundbreaking. But again, these firms are starting to realize that machine learning is super, super, super fragile. So stats has all this theory backing it. And stats is basically going to have a lot of, theoretical constructs that prevent you from overfitting and all this stuff. Machine learning, on the other hand, is more or less just looking at how to maximize correlation between different variables. Regulators across the board on the banking side are requiring that you understand what you're doing, what's going on behind it, because, of course, we're going to see terrible events from people misusing machine learning, just like we saw with copula modeling back in 2008. It'll have its place. So machine learning, data science, it has its place, and there's some areas we're seeing some good advantages. But again, having causality is actually crucial, because if you think about it from a business perspective, a lot of times we want to know like what causes the event, and then how do we adjust that cause to make a better impact. So again, if you know what's going to make a company go bankrupt, for example, or what's going to make a company more profitable, and it's in your model, and we know, like, I don't know, the Federal Reserve or someone or the political scene makes some decision that's going to change that, people are going to be adapting quickly. And if that's in your model, you want it to adapt quickly as well. You don't want your machine learning model to fall behind because it's lacking new information. So there are pros and cons of data science and machine learning. No, it's not going to take over the world. There have been people, even experts, I won't say who, that have been predicting it's going to take over the world and by 2020 or by 2018. And yet we've passed all those, and most of their promises haven't come to fruition here. So take it with what you may. I think it's a good area to get into, but you need to have other skills besides that, and I don't think it's ever going to take over. Let's scroll down here. I'll answer this one, even though it's not necessarily my favorite question. Is it possible to make the transition from quant research to quant trader and vice versa? Is it worth it in terms of salary and job safety? Okay. The skills are very different between quant and trader. I have a video coming out, as I mentioned, so I'll have you watch that. The difference is really fast thinking and slow thinking. If you're a trader and you don't have a quantitative background, no, you're not going to be a quant researcher. If you don't have a PhD, you're most likely never going to work on the quant research side. So going from trader to researcher is very, very rare, unlikely. Going from researcher to trader, yeah, it's possible. Go for it. In terms of salary and job safety and all that, there are way too many factors to factor into that. So you hear absorbent salaries that people state. Again, if you even look at like the salaries which are inflated on QuantNet for program rankings for people coming out, you'll see on their salaries like 100 and 120, I think is what a lot of people are listing these days. Intro level quants, again, it varies. If you want to work on the banking side, which is more stable, it'll pay less. If you want to work on the hedge fund side, sure, it can pay 120, but you're living in New York City, it's super expensive. Just to give you a little perspective on that, if you're not from New York City, I had a buddy of mine spending $1,200 a month to rent a room in an apartment. So he had like 2 or 3 other roommates. I was renting an apartment in New Jersey, and I was paying $4,000 a month. So $120,000 is like drop in the bucket. Are you going to make $700,000 coming out because that's what someone's friend said? No, you're not. Even with a PhD from, MIT or something, it's extremely rare unless you have like a bunch of publications and, a whole history and track record in that. Salary-wise, quants versus traders, it changes every year. in recent trends, or at least trends when I was looking for jobs way back when in the trading side, there wasn't a significant difference. Again, these firms are realizing without the quants you can't trade, without the traders you can't trade. So salaries are typically split based on performance. So again, a quant can make, I don't know, a good sum of money, say X, and a trader can make the same. So I don't know. I don't see a lot of difference between the comps. Let's see. Somebody says, hey, Dimitri, to pursue a position in stats arbitrage, would you recommend focusing more on algorithmic trading or financial statistics with a MFE curriculum? Financial statistics all the way. Again, doing statistical arbitrage, you're going to want as much statistics as possible to build those strategies and theories. Again, algorithmic trading might provide you some interesting insights, but if you're going to go on the stats arbitrage side, I would do financial statistics. It's more specific to stats arbitrage. And I don't know, you can pick some other stuff up on that. Again, it's a master's. You have limited time. I would just do financial stats because it's more relevant to stats arbitrage. Let's see. Let's answer this one. How to become a developer that quants love to work with? And what skills, tech stack, quants look for from a dev? Okay, so first of all, how to be a developer that other quants like to work with? Just be a fun person to be around. All the jobs I worked at, almost all the jobs I worked at, the majority of the jobs, I guess every job I've worked at, I've had fun colleagues that like we have a good old time. And it's just because you find people that you relate with, people that you work well with. Again, being happy, being friendly, those are fun things. Quant industry as well can get very focused on being right all the time. And I did an interview with a buddy of mine who's a derivatives trader. It's on the channel if you look it up. And I was kind of taken back when he said it, but I asked him, what advice would you give to a student or whatever? And he said, the finance, if you want to get good finance, you always have to be right. And I think that's more true than ever. Quants are going to hold you to a super high standard of being right. The more often that you are right and you don't misspeak, the better. One way to do that without having to be right all the time is just when you don't know, just don't say anything. That's a pretty good one to be. It's a pretty easy comment to make. Again, if you're really good at your job too and you're not braggy, people will just kind of gravitate towards you even when you're having to give them bad news and tell them like, I'm sorry, your work sucks and I don't know, you got to redo it. And so if you're honest and upfront with them, but you're really good at your job and people realize like, okay, you really know what you're talking about, like you're not trying to be mean and nasty, people like to work with you regardless. I think that's kind of a big piece there. What skills, tech, stacks, quants look for from a developer position? I can tell you statistics. I can't drive that home enough. Again, if you're going to work on the derivative side, you need to know stochastic calculus. You need a ton of mathematics above and beyond that. Real analysis, for example, I would recommend as a requirement. Those are things that are just crucial. You would need as many as possible as math skills you can get. Being able to code well is something else that is helpful. You don't have to be an expert on it, but write clean code. I'm so sick of seeing people writing, like I've seen macros nested in macros, nested in macros, nested in like 10 more macros, and then they use it one time. Like, don't build complexity and nonsense I have to go through if you're just not going to use it. Like, it's just used once. So, again, just be fun, friendly. My colleagues, for example, at a variety of firms I've worked at all over the industry, we all have like weird commonalities. So we chat about, like sports, college sports, a lot of us, because we all went to different colleges here. A lot of us talk about like gardening or vacations, where everyone's traveling, what everyone's kids are doing. So yeah, just be a nice person in general. And somebody put statistics for development. Okay, let me specify on that. So when some people specify quant dev, they think that means someone who writes a lot of code. That's called model implementation. And it depends on the firm as well. So some firms have people doing implementation and development together, and they call it quant dev. When I say model development or development, I assume that's someone who's actually building statistical models. Again, at a real quant firm or a firm that's doing actual scientific, rigorous research for strategies on trading, investing, or even solving banking problems, you're going to want to be able to know strategy. And to do that, you need statistical modeling and methods. Everything from Black-Scholes to, credit risk to operational models to, I don't know, OLS, regressions, everything takes stats. Even machine learning, you do, I don't know, gradient boosting, decision trees, that takes stats. Everything takes stats. So you're going to need stats, stats, stats. People that don't have a good stats background typically don't do very well unless they're super, super, super niche into one specific area and that's all they know. But again, you're still going to have the stats to the majority of that. So again, depends how you define development. If you define it as someone who's just a code monkey writing code all day, sure, you would need just computer science skills, but I don't view you as a quant. That's not how I define it. Okay. Somebody else said, you used to race motorbikes, right? Do you still race? Funny story. So I raced when I was probably 16, 17, and then girls took over at 18-ish. I stopped racing, and then ended up going to college. I had no money. Racing motorcycles is super, super expensive. So I didn't do it for a while. And this last year, at the end of 2020, I actually went and picked up my bikes from my parents' house. So there's a possibility I might be racing again just for fun. I'll definitely be rebuilding bikes though soon. Kind of working on that. Let's see. Any advice for someone trying to move from front office wealth management to quant role as completing a master's in data science? I think you're in a good position, to be honest with you. The big key here is going to be writing the resume and trying to show people that you have a really well-developed education. So a big mistake I see from students a lot of times is students will go to their masters and they write their resume and they try to make it seem as if like they're the most experienced person, and they try to put all these internships on there and they try to put on all this work experience and try to show people they're experienced. When you hire a student, you really want someone who's a excellent student. Again, if you're doing your master's in data science, show on there again how strong you are at data science, but also try to show like your other skills and that are applicable to that job posting. So if they have a quant role and they're looking for someone who has experience in, I don't know, some other area, let's say like mortgages, for example. So like, I don't know, you can say mortgage-backed securities or mortgage origination, something like that. Again, show the skills. Look at online. You can search for like the different types of models you have, and just try to put those kind of skills in that resume as well. Let's see. Somebody asked, Dimitri, is there any good resources you recommend for avoid overfitting? Machine learning or stats? Machine learning is a nightmare, and you can use L1, L2 to try to reduce it. The best way, though, to avoid this is the way that you sample your data. So I'll make a technical video probably on this, but the majority of people using data science, machine learning, and finance aren't creating their samples correctly. So think about testing, training, data sets. We call them dev and out of time. Again, you have testing, training, and then there's one more in machine learning. You have 3 sets. But when you do finance is time-based. There's no way around that. It doesn't matter what area you work in, you can't get away from time. So most people spend all this time like trying to run and hide from time series because time is scary and it makes things complicated. When you split data for machine learning, again, make sure you split it on time. I've seen so many people do k-folds and cross-validation nonsense where you take your entire development period and then you try to sample a little bit from every single year as like your development or your training testing set here. And then you're doing your out of time set, this is testing, you do the out of time set here and you're going to test it on new data. They resample across all those same time periods. Yeah, you're going to have the same set of data. Your model's going to look stellar. You see this constantly. The best way to avoid overfitting, besides using like L1, L2 regularization, is going to be the way that you structure your data and how you test your problem. Try to put in more new data sets or new types of data. Even put in like unclean data and see how it processes, because you really want to stress the model to see how it holds up. So that's kind of one of the better approaches. The other piece too to avoid overfitting is looking at causality. So again, the Shapley values is something that's kind of been booming right now across the industry, and I don't know, even in the data science world. Looking at the contributions of different pieces within those models, so for example, like decision trees, and trying to figure out what's the final impact and how they impact the model. If you have something that seems nonsensical and it's making up the majority of it, your model's probably not going to last in the long run. Somebody asked about, developing volatility surfaces and which software is used for that. I can't tell you. I don't work on volatility surfaces on the derivative side. I don't work in the financial engineering side of it, so I don't model that. Let's see. Any tips on management? Okay, any tips on time management in general or specifically to self-learning, especially when you have many ongoing projects and classes? Schedule. I can't emphasize that enough either. Scheduling is crucial, and I know it's hard, so I'll talk about why. I find myself, I can't jump from one thing to another thing quickly and do a bunch of things together. Even in grad school, I had like hours blocked out, and it was like a very specific class for a very specific assignment, and that's all I would work on, and I'd try to spend as much as possible just doing that. That's crucial. Again, if you can put it on a calendar too, you can see where you do and don't have time. I used to eat and study all the time. I never had time for dinner or lunches and all that stuff. So you eat while you study and go to class and everything. But if you can create a schedule and a reasonable schedule and stick to it, and you can get a pattern down, you'll stick to it in the long run as well, so it'll get easier. But that's probably the most important piece here, because a lot of times students will want to work on something, and then they kind of get partway through it and they jump to something else, and then they kind of get through that and they jump to something else. Again, I think the biggest thing is having a schedule and setting up very long time periods to work on projects or work on like homework or whatever you're doing. So kind of just my tips on that. Nothing fancy. I tried using an app called Trello, and I failed miserably because it's too much effort for me to go on my phone and put in data and information. So anyways, just kind of my 2 cents on that. Your thoughts on bachelor's and CS. So what are your thoughts on bachelor in CS followed by a master's in financial engineering? I think that's a stellar, a really good combination. The reason for that is because computer science, again, you're going to learn to program and do it well. You'll learn a lot more than just programming, as I pointed out in other things I talked about. And again, you'll be taking some math, which is good as well. So you should be prepared mathematically. You might need to do a little bit of studying before you transition. But I think it's a good combination, because those that can understand computer science well, you'll just be a lot more productive at the work you do. So I think it's crucial. Like it's a good combination. You can do other combinations, but computer science is one of the routes I thought about looking backwards at my career. Let's see. What is the average salary at your firm? A, I can't disclose that. And B, I have no idea, because there's so many people at different companies. Companies are huge. Let's see. Okay, somebody asked R or Python. It depends. My advice is pick one language and stick with it. Python is a lot better for data science and machine learning. It's also far better to run Python on a Linux machine and not a Windows machine. Just my 2 cents. Python doesn't work real well on Windows a lot of times. There's all kinds of issues. It's just a headache to use sometimes. R is far better for statistics. So it's more designed to do statistics. That was what it was made to do. Python, again, is more or less made to do a variety of things. It can do stats. SAS, so if anyone knows of SAS is a lot better at stats than both of them combined. But again, SAS doesn't do data science very well, so take it or leave them. Let's see. What is something about quant finance that you learned gradually while working in the industry? Everything, probably everything. My expertise comes in time series. That's where my favorite I guess, aspects are. Uh, you learn a little bit in grad school, even if you take like an econometrics course, you'll learn some time series and you think you know it, but you really don't. Uh, for me, though, the things that I know best are things that I've learned slowly because I learned a little bit and then I went and I tried to apply them and then people tell you you're wrong and they show you where you're wrong. And then you have to go back to the drawing board basically and like crack open those textbooks that you had from, I don't know, grad school and go back to those textbooks and see what topics you do and don't have. And then figure out, how you're going to learn it and then trying to patch those holes. Over time, it's taken me a long time to kind of build my quant finance time series knowledge. Again, you guys, technical things take a long time to learn, and the more you learn about something, the deeper you can go. So, for example, a lot of I talk a lot about stationarity, which is just one time series concept. I'm pretty confident I could write a textbook on it. It's a dream to do one day. But yeah, the deeper you go, the more you learn. Learning is a very slow process if you're doing it correctly and you can remember it in the long run. So, let's see. Somebody asked here, what programming languages are used the most in financial engineering? C++, Java, Python, R, MATLAB. Is it worth learning SQL? Okay, I don't work on the financial engineering side. I work on the quant side, so general quant side, so building models. Low-level languages, typically like C++ and Java, are used for implementation. So think about algorithmic trading, right? You built some crazy model and you have to implement it as fast as possible, or even if it's just not super fast. But even if you're doing like algorithmic trading, so high frequency is different than algorithmic, but I won't get into that. You still want to implement it in a low-level language. So even like, I don't know, say you apply for a loan at a bank, all that stuff is still implemented in C++. They're not going to pick some high-level language to do it. They just need efficiency because they might have a large volume of loans coming in or out. So, it just depends. Is it worth learning SQL? Yes. I would say so for a lot of people. A lot of firms store their data in servers, and SQL is used that way to access that data. To be honest with you, to learn SQL just functionally, so you can just do what you need to do, it shouldn't take you very long to do it. I don't know. Take a Coursera course, Udemy course. I've self-taught myself SQL and can use it to do all kinds of things. Again, it shouldn't take you that long. If you already know another programming language, SQL is like like a week to a month worth project. But again, you could get far more expert on it if you wanted over time. Somebody asked, do you know anything about quantitative finance, one of the actuarial fellowship tracks? No, I don't follow the actuarial side. I dug a little bit when I worked with a few people that are interested in the actuarial side. I try to avoid it somewhat because there's not a lot of overlap, and from what I've seen on the actuarial quant finance piece, it's very, very light on what quants actually do. Just my piece for actuaries in general. Dear actuaries, please focus on what you're good at, which is insurance and other products. It seems like the industry as a whole is trying to do everything, and if you try to cover everything, it's hard to be good at anything. So if you're trying to teach quant finance, you're trying to teach, different types of insurance, for example, it's hard to do it. I think one reason why MBAs are losing value as well is they're trying to cover too many topics in too many areas. It's one of my criticisms of data science about, adding into quant finance. Yes, it's a required tool for quant finance, but if we spend too much time trying to focus on too many different areas, a lot of times you lose kind of that sharp edge of what you're good at. But again, it could be great. I don't know. I have not seen any actuaries who have that designation, so I can't say that it's great or not great. Let's see. Okay, so someone says when you're talking about statistics background, is that more so focusing on the modeling like econometrics, et cetera, or things like stochastic calculus, stochastic optimal control, probability theory, et cetera? Okay, so I view things very differently than most, I have found out. People in Europe have notified me that they think statistics is not the same as probability. For me, they're two sides of the same coin. Again, one thing that I realized after graduate school was that time series is nothing more than stochastic processes. So to understand stochastic calculus, to understand stochastic optimal control, probability theory, all that you wrote on there, you need to understand probability theory, you need to understand stochastic processes, and stochastic processes are time series, and time series are part of econometrics. So I don't think one belongs to the other, but again, applying math and statistics to financial problems, all those things kind of accumulate into one field and range. Statistics, again, is kind of that core for the majority of them. Stochastic calculus, again, is just specifically the mathematics applied to a stochastic processes. So again, it's just math. But again, you're going to need, it applies to everything. When you start building, for example, time series models, understanding how a stochastic processes works helps with the testing and development. It also helps you understand why your model does or doesn't work and how to build it better. Again, there are other methods you can see, like stochastic calculus or stochastic processes can be applied to other problems. So something a lot of people don't know, you can look it up. There's something called DTD, which is dual time dynamics. It's a way of modeling credit models across time using curves, like vintage curves. Again, it uses stochastic calculus for credit risk. So stochastic calculus can be used in many places outside of derivative pricing. Let's see. Somebody asked, Dimitri, let's see, Democratic or Republican? I'm libertarian, so different than the two. Okay, thoughts on bachelor's in math, econ major versus bachelor's in statistics? That's challenging. But I'd say go with stats, depending on what your interests are. If your interests are more focused on like math, you enjoy math better, I would do the math econ route. If you like stats better, do stats. The reason I say that is having math and econ together is good, but a lot of economics programs, so coming from someone who has an economics degree, a lot of economics programs lack the math and statistical rigor that I would like to see in the programs. And so a lot of times you focus on economics and more of like the political aspects of it, or I don't know, nonsensical theories, and people get into like teaching, I don't know, personal views and opinions. If you watch my economics rant on one of the videos, you can see that you can see on there that it's, you know, it's just a lot of times the stuff they teach you is nonsense. So in econ, it's a double-edged sword. It could be great, it could not. If you double it up with a math degree, that could be pretty useful. Again, I would pick what you like better because both of those would be well suited for getting a, you know, quant finance master's of some sorts. All right, let's see. Let's answer a few more questions here. I'll try to end this around 9:30. It's like 15 more minutes. It's actually surprised how many people are actually on here. And I can see the average duration, which is 6 minutes and 22 seconds, which is pretty cool. Okay, somebody asked, how did you build your quant time series skills, like subjects and all? Okay, so I learned a little bit of the base in grad school. So we kind of started off with that, but we never covered a lot of it. My first job was focused around building time series models. And I learned a lot from just watching. So a lot of times I wasn't the one assigned to building. I was just kind of watching and asking questions. And then I challenged a lot of people over time as I read more and more and more and realized people don't do things necessarily the correct way, or people just have a misunderstanding of how things are done. And sitting and arguing with people, so yes, people get very upset when you disagree with them a lot of times in the quant world. Having those debates and having those discussions, even though they're extremely frustrating at times, those have really made me go back and look at more. So people will bring up a really good point on, you can do it this way because of this reason. So I'll give you an example. People will say, you don't need stationarity in data because you can use a co-integrated model. Well, it's not true. And again, you can search online and find people making that statement. But having to go back and challenge yourself and look at what's going on and why, so what's wrong with that statement, and trying to find academic support in papers is crucial. If you're going to build a really solid background in a subject, look for the original papers and then look for the papers that build on it. Don't look for modern people's interpretations. So for example, if you're going to do time series, I go back to like Engel Granger's papers, I go to Johansson's papers, I go to a Dickey and Fuller's papers. Going back to those core foundation and understanding the basic principles first, that's where a lot of the mistakes are had. So a lot of people get all excited and they say, oh, we're going to learn all these crazy, time series models, and we're going to do, something more advanced, and we're going to do all this stuff. If you don't know the basics really well, you'll make a lot of mistakes when you apply the more advanced models, especially now that it's so easy to do it in like Python and R. and then it's not done correctly, but you don't fully have that layering. So again, having someone to challenge you over time is really how I've learned it. But material-wise, it's been just through an assortment of books and academic papers and testing and kind of thinking through these problems. So that was a pretty good question. Let's see. And yeah, I read a bunch of textbooks. So one of the big textbooks for time series is called Time Series Analysis by Hamilton. It's very mathy. I don't think it's a good book to start with, but bouncing between like stats and econometrics perspectives and mathematician perspectives and different perspectives on a subject, you really start to see it in a very different light than you would learn going to either like a math program or a stats program or in like an econometrics program. Let's see. Somebody put, which point in your career you started feeling confident about your modeling? That's a challenge. Probably after I quit my first job and went to work on my second job. The reason for it, and even this is in general, a lot of quants, including myself, struggle with what we call imposter syndrome. So it's where you never feel like you're good enough and you always are convinced you're wrong. Like, there's no way I'm that good at it, right? There's no way that I can build good models. There's no way I know what I'm talking about. There's no way I can give advice on something. But after I left my first job, I really started realizing that the models I was building, the information I was giving them was solid. And I think the selling point for me was I built a model that somebody threw me some data that wasn't so-called modelable. They said, just build me some, cheap moving average model in Excel and call it good. I said, well, do you mind if I build a stats model? They said, no, you do whatever you want. I don't really care. And then it was the impossible model. Someone else, PhDs and everything, spent weeks or months, or I think it was like multiple months, like 6 months on this. They didn't have time to deal with it. So they just said, somebody else do it. And I built a model, and that model lasted, and then I quit and went somewhere else. I checked back with a colleague of mine to see like if they were still using that model. And that model was still being used 2 years after it was developed. A lot of models at different firms have very short lifespans. So it can be, depending on your application. If you have trading applications, your lifespan's going to be much shorter. For regulatory purposes, it should last you at least a year. But a lot of models would fail in shorter time periods, like a year, 6 months or something. And as soon as I realized my model, like that model I built, when I had that chance, stood up to time and it was still working and working well. That was kind of where my confidence came from. But again, one of the takeaways I always have is I'm always looking for why I'm wrong. I'm not looking for why I'm right. And I think that's a big strength for a lot of quants of coping with imposter syndrome, is that you're always checking yourself. You're always like your worst critic. Like I'm always thinking, oh, this is a terrible model. It has to be a terrible model. And I check and I recheck and I run tests and I look at different angles and plot different sets of data of the residuals, trying to figure out where am I missing something. And so I think a lot of the confidence again comes from that piece. I'm still always hesitant in my modeling, which I think is a good kind of attitude to have, even when you get better at it. But when you start realizing that your models outperform other people's models based on performance, but also on longevity, I think when you hit the longevity piece, that's when you should know that your models are done quite well, or you're a decent developer at least. Let's see what other questions we have here. Okay, somebody asked, is it worth making a CFA 3 certificate to confirm knowledge of finance? If you work on the investing side, I would do it. So I'm not a big fan of designations in general, but for the investing side, people want to know that you understand how businesses are put together. It's like accounting, for example. They want to understand financials, how finances work and all that, and like the trading and markets. So I think the CFA is actually one of those things where a lot of people in the investing community view it as a positive. So if you add it on to a quant degree, I think it's like a stellar thing to do in many ways. So I would do it if you have the time and you can do it. Let's see. Somebody asked, does an MFE degree in 5 years as front desk quant sufficient to start a fund by yourself? I would say no. I guess the answer is maybe. So running a fund is very, very different from actually like just building models or finding trades. You have to manage all the people, the legal headaches, the HR staff. Like, there's a lot of other things that go into it besides just knowing how to build models or knowing how to trade. And so, anyways, so I have a whole podcast season coming out talking about my business experiences. I worked in manufacturing at a startup for 8 years. I'll talk a lot about the pains, the successes, things like that. But running a business has essentially zero overlap with being a quant. You need to build an excellent team around you as well to succeed in business and even running funds. Finding those people is crucial. Could you find a stellar team in 5 years? Yeah, it's likely. I don't know. You'd have to look at it though. But again, finding those right people around you is a big piece of making a hedge fund and running it successfully. Okay, somebody put, are there any applications of quant finance that one can tweak and apply to conventional finance, such as business deposit accounts? Yes, there are. Quant finance is really just applying science to traditional finance, but doing it much more rigorously than what people in finance typically do. So if you work at like a bigger bank, a lot of times there's models that work with traditional finance. Again, they will use things that are more or less like statistical methods for modeling things. Again, smaller banks aren't going to do this because they don't want to hire and pay a bunch of money to a quant. But a lot of times, yeah, things like deposits, for example, we can model those. And a lot of times those are actually required to be modeled. So if you look up CCAR, which is the Comprehensive Capital Assessment Review, I believe, Analysis Review, the regulation for CCAR, all banks in the United States are required to do this over a specific threshold of how many assets you hold on the books. I worked in what they call PPNR, which is pre-provisional net revenue. That basically just means we modeled anything that was on the balance sheet or the income statement, and we'd have to do this financially, and then we'd run scenarios on what was going to be an average economic cycle, an adverse scenario basically, and then like the market tanks and crashes, which we call severe. We'd have to model it and see like what are those, for example, what are those deposits going to do, right? If we're going to have a big drop and I'm going to lose all these deposits for some reason, right? We need to know that. We need to know how much capital we have on hand to kind of absorb shocks across the business. So something else might fail, but you need to make sure you have enough capital to maintain the business. So yeah, yep, you can do quant finance on traditional finance. There's not a lot of difference. It's just applying it more complexly. But again, you might not necessarily need it depending on the size of the bank. So what are some things you wish you knew or did in undergrad? I wish I would have went to more sporting events, had more fun. A lot of times I was focused too much on my academics. The other thing is I wish I would have really understood quant finance and what it was at a younger age. I didn't discover quant finance until my senior year. I think it was like my last semester, maybe second to last semester. And even then I didn't have a full grasp on it. I thought it was like trading and finance. It just has to do with trading. And people don't realize it's just applying scientific methods to financial problems. So again, you can do it on like the banking side, or you can do it in corporate finance and other areas. Again, you're not going to use a lot of these methods in simpler problems, but I wish I would have known that more so because I would have prepared very differently and I would have had a clearer path of what to do. I looked online when I was in undergrad and I had no idea what I was doing. People would ask me like, oh, you're going, you like this class you took your last semester and you're going to go on and do a financial engineering master's. And I'd have to explain what financial engineering was. So I just wish I would have done that more. I wish I would have had a little more fun, enjoyed the time there. Even in grad school, I studied like crazy. And I didn't go to as many sporting events and kind of had as much fun until towards the end. But trying to have that balance, I think, is just a good concept in life. Accounting to quant finance? It's possible, but it's very unlikely. Again, you'd need a lot of math. Again, having a lot of undergrad math, Calc 1 to 3. Again, if you can take real analysis, it's something you should take. Again, understanding how it works more deeply, I think, is a crucial piece of working in calculus. Taking probability, for example, as well, and not like business stats. You take like an actual probability course. It's possible, but unlikely. I'd ask you though the question of why you would want to switch. Like maybe that would answer more your question on like, do you find accounting boring, or do you think you're going to make a lot more money, or like what's the switch? I don't know. Try to develop that a little better. Let's see what else. Favorite movie? Man, that's a thinker. I don't watch a lot of movies, guys. Probably A Beautiful Mind with Nash, about Nash, the Nash Equilibrium, the guy that did all that. That's probably my favorite movie. Favorite programming language and book? Oh man, that's a tough one. I don't think I have a favorite programming language, to be honest with you. I've been doing a lot of R programming lately, so that's been leaning towards my favorite. But from a business standpoint and working on a daily job, SAS makes my life significantly easier. A favorite book? Oh man, favorite book. My favorite quant book is probably Wooldridge's book, Econometrics, like an introduction to modern econometrics, something like that. I've done a book review on it. You can look at my channel. I absolutely love the book. Again, people are going to criticize and say, "Oh, Dimitri, it's such a simple book," and yet that's where the mistakes are made. My book is highlighted from, most of the pages are highlighted, and at the back there's an advanced section. I still haven't even covered the advanced section. Like, I just don't have time. It goes through like panel data, so I crack it open for like, I don't know, simultaneous estimation models, whatever they're called. Like those types of models, I just haven't had the time to go back and look at it. But that book's probably my favorite, hands down. It's a fairly expensive book, but you can get like older versions. I have an older version book. I just like the structure of it as well, the way it progresses throughout. I'll give you two. A book I'm currently reading is, I don't think I have it sitting here. I think it's called The Maps of Meaning. It's a book by Jordan Peterson. It's like a textbook though. So I've read his other book on like the 12 Rules of Life, 12 Rules, whatever it's called. Anyways, I'm reading his actual textbook on like psychology and sociology and putting together life. So I like that. I like that book though. Right now I'm reading. So another recommendation if you're kind of a nerd in like the psychology realm. Somebody asked if I use Koopman theory much in job. No, I don't. But again, it depends which area of quant finance you work. Okay, let me follow up on here. So I'm a CS major, and I was curious on your thoughts for accounting. Um, to be honest with you, you don't have enough time to take all the classes needed, again, to cover all kinds of topics. I don't know if I would spend time on accounting. Again, if you're going to study, you can study for like the CFA, and you can learn quite a bit through there and self-study it. But I don't know if I'd spend time on that. I would spend more time taking like math and stats classes, or maybe some computer science as well. Again, you're a computer science major, so already taking that. I would look to take interesting classes in like math and stats. Accounting could be beneficial, but anyways. I'm going to answer one more question, then we're going to wrap it up because it is 9:31. I was not sure even how long I would have this, but big thank you before I answer this last one here to everyone who came. And I'll talk a little bit after I answer this, but... Okay, I'll answer this. This is a pretty good one. What's the end goal for a quant like after 15 years in industry? It depends what you want to do for a career. So there are quants that stay on the quant side, meaning they specialize in specific types of analysis in quantitative finance, and they do that for an entire career. A lot of firms will pay you more the longer you've been there. You also gain more expertise. Again, you can stay that route. The problem, though, is that a lot of times to make more money, quants end up going up the management chain. And the more up the management chain you get, the further disconnected you are from that quant side. And so a lot of quants, even myself included, as I get further up, I get really like nervous and kind of scared in a way that I'm going to lose my quantness, right? I'm not going to lose my abilities and skills because you start spending more and more and more time in meetings and management and dealing with politics and all kinds of things that you don't necessarily want to deal with. But as you move up the chain, you end up becoming a manager. I think the end goal for a lot of quants should be at least to be an executive of some sort. So chief risk officer is a big one for the banking industry. For people that are not, if you're on the investing or trading side, it'd be someone who's running the firm. So working in, again, that top tier or starting your own firm. Long term, you want to kind of end up in a position where you're managing, teaching, and running other quants. again, do you really want to lose your quant skills and like the fun and ability to do research and whatnot? That's kind of the challenge. So some people stay in that path forever. Some people move on to management. Again, keeping both of those in check, though, I think is super challenging. It's a big, I don't know, it's a big struggle. So, anyways, just a big thank you to everybody. There's apparently 41 people still viewing. It looks like 542 total views. Average watch time 654. Like, this is more than expected. My camera is shot, which is kind of crazy. So like I unplugged it and plugged it into the other USB ports, and for some reason it just won't come on. So I don't know if there's like a power overload and then it like fried the camera. I don't know. We'll test it out. But anyways, huge thank you to you guys. I know it's late here in the United States. We will do another one of these. This went pretty well, minus the camera issues. We'll do another one of these in the morning in the US time so we can capture other places like Europe, for example, and Africa. So anyways, thank you guys.